The council chamber stretched as far as the eye could see. Beings from 1,000 different worlds filled the massive space. Some floated in containment fields. Others stood on platforms adjusted to their specific gravity needs. A few existed as pure energy, their forms shifting and changing in the artificial atmosphere. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the center of it all. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver buttons that caught the light from the chamber's artificial suns. His boots clicked against the crystalline floor as he walked to the speaking platform. Behind him, 3 other humans waited nervously. They had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. The humans had been discovered 30 years ago by a Valorian scout ship. The Valorians were tall beings with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. They wore elaborate robes that marked their status in the galactic hierarchy. Their empire controlled over 200 star systems, and they considered themselves the finest military power in known space. Ambassador Thel Zara of the Valorian Empire sat in the front row of the council seats. Her crystalline features showed amusement as she watched the human delegation. She had been the one to sponsor humanity's application for council membership, not because she believed in them, but because she wanted to demonstrate Valorian generosity to lesser species. Elder Vexthor materialized at the head of the chamber. The being was ancient, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. It existed as pure energy contained within a matrix of living crystal. When it spoke, its voice resonated through every translation device in the room. "We have reviewed the human application for council membership," Vexthor said. "We have studied their history, their culture, their technological development. We have observed their expansion into their local star cluster, and we have reached a decision." Jake felt his heart pound in his chest. Everything humanity had worked for came down to this moment. Earth had united for the first time in its history. The old nations had set aside their differences. They had pooled their resources, their knowledge, their dreams of reaching the stars, and now they stood before the galactic community asking to be recognized as equals. "The application is denied," Vexthor announced. A murmur ran through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. Others looked surprised. The human delegation stood frozen. Jake found his voice.
"May I ask why?"
Vexthor's form pulsed with light. "Your species is too young, too volatile. Your history is written in blood. In the 3,000 years of recorded human civilization, you have fought over 15,000 wars. You have developed hundreds of ways to kill each other. Even now, with your world united, you maintain massive military forces. You solve your problems through violence rather than discussion. That's not fair," said Lieutenant Katie Brooks, one of Jake's officers. "We've been at peace for 20 years. 20 years, Thel Zara said with a laugh. "Children. You're absolute children playing at civilization. My people have maintained peace for 20 centuries. We've evolved beyond your primitive need for conflict." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced it down. "We fight because we have things worth fighting for. Family, freedom, our home. If that makes us primitive, then maybe we're proud to be primitive." More laughter rippled through the chamber. A delegate from the Krethian Syndicate, a species that looked like giant insects with 6 legs and compound eyes, clicked its mandibles in what passed for amusement among its kind. "You see," Thel Zara said to the council. "Even here, even now, they speak of fighting. They cannot help themselves. It's in their nature." Vexthor raised one crystalline appendage. "The decision is final. Humanity may reapply in 100 years if they can demonstrate sustained peaceful development. Until then, they are restricted to their current territory. Any attempt to expand beyond their designated borders will be met with sanctions." Jake wanted to argue more, but he knew it was pointless. He had seen the votes before the announcement was made. The council had decided weeks ago. This meeting was just a formality. "We understand," Jake said quietly. "Thank you for your time." He turned and walked out of the chamber. His delegation followed. Behind them, the council moved on to other business. Humanity's rejection was already forgotten. Just another minor species that had failed to meet galactic standards. Outside the chamber, Jake's team gathered around him. "That was garbage," said Commander Pete Harris, their chief engineer. "They didn't even give us a fair chance." "They're afraid of us," added Dr. Helen Carter, their lead scientist. "They've lived in peace so long they've forgotten what it means to fight for something." Jake shook his head. "It doesn't matter. We go home and we keep building. In 100 years we'll be back, and maybe by then they'll see us differently." But he was wrong. They wouldn't have to wait 100 years. 2 weeks after the Council rejection, the Valorian Empire made its move. They had been planning it for months. The Council's decision gave them the excuse they needed. A Valorian fleet of 20 ships dropped out of hyperspace above New Haven, humanity's newest colony world. The planet sat on the edge of human territory, far from Earth's protection. It had been settled only 5 years earlier by volunteers looking for a fresh start. Scientists, farmers, teachers, artists. People who wanted to build something new. The colony had minimal defenses. A few orbital platforms with outdated weapons. A small security force with hand weapons. They had never expected to need more. The galaxy was supposed to be civilized. Admiral Kethrak commanded the Valorian fleet from his flagship, the Pride of Valor. He was old by Valorian standards, his skin darkened by age, his forearms decorated with the scars of a dozen campaigns. He had fought in the last Great War 60 years ago. He remembered what real combat looked like, and he thought these humans needed to be taught their place. "Open a channel to the colony," he ordered. On New Haven, Governor Linda Shaw received the transmission in her office. She was a middle-aged woman with gray in her hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She had spent her whole life preparing for this job. She had studied colonial administration, crisis management, agricultural development. Nothing had prepared her for this. "This is Admiral Kethrak of the Valorian Imperial Fleet." The alien's voice boomed through the speakers. "Your colony exists in violation of accepted territorial boundaries. You have been warned. You did not listen. Now you will learn the cost of human arrogance." "Wait," Linda said desperately. "We can talk about this. We're not soldiers. We're just farmers and scientists. We have children here, families." "Your council application was denied," Kethrak said. "You are not recognized as a legitimate civilization. This territory belongs to the Valorian Empire by right of discovery. You are trespassing. You have 1 hour to evacuate." The channel closed. Linda immediately activated the emergency protocols. Alarms blared across the colony. People ran to the evacuation shelters. Parents grabbed their children. The security chief, a former soldier named Carl Bennett, organized the defense even though he knew it was hopeless. 1 hour passed. Then the sky began to burn. Valorian plasma weapons lit up the atmosphere. The orbital platforms exploded in brilliant flashes. Then the bombardment hit the surface. Buildings vaporized. Fields turned to ash. The evacuation shelters held for a while, their reinforced walls resisting the initial strikes. But the Valorians were thorough. Governor Shaw died in her office trying to send out a final distress call. Carl Bennett died defending the main shelter, his small pistol useless against Valorian battle armor. A teacher named Susan Wright died shielding her students with her own body. In 3 hours, New Haven ceased to exist. 8,000 people dead. The colony reduced to smoking craters. The Valorian fleet transmitted footage of the destruction to the Galactic Council as proof of their power. Ambassador Thelzara watched the footage with satisfaction. "Let this be a lesson," she told the Council. "Humans needed to understand their place. Now they do," but she was wrong. Completely, catastrophically wrong. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Kate Sullivan received the distress call in her office at military headquarters. She watched the footage of New Haven burning. She saw the destruction of the colony her sister had moved to 3 years ago. She saw the death toll listing and found her sister's name, her 2 nephews. Her brother-in-law Kate sat in silence for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the war room. The other admirals were already gathering. The president was on his way. Nobody spoke. They didn't need to. They all knew what came next. Humanity had been rejected by the Council. They had been attacked without provocation. They had lost thousands of innocent civilians. The Valorians thought they had taught the humans a lesson. They thought they had demonstrated superior power. They thought the matter was settled. They had no idea what they had just started. The galaxy was about to learn why the Council had been right to worry about humanity. Why violence and warfare weren't things to laugh about. Why a species that had spent thousands of years fighting each other knew exactly how to fight everyone else. The Valorians had wanted to see what humans would do when pushed. They were about to find out. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the war room staring at the star charts. Red markers indicated Valorian territory. Blue markers showed human space. New Haven had been right on the border, a small blue dot that now blinked red to show it was lost. Around the table sat the other fleet commanders. Admiral Frank Cooper commanded the Mars Defense Fleet. Admiral Betty Holmes led the Outer System Patrol. Commander Jake Morrison had returned from the Council and now served as tactical advisor. President Andrew Carter sat at the head of the table, his face grave. "How many ships can we mobilize?" the president asked. 23 warships, Kate said. "Everything we have that's combat ready. Another 15 are in dock for maintenance, but we can rush them into service in 2 weeks." "The Valorian defense fleet in that sector numbers over 100 ships," Jake said. "Intelligence says they have advanced shielding technology, plasma weapons, energy barriers that can absorb kinetic impacts. So we're outgunned," President Carter said. "Significantly," Kate agreed. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what should happen next. Diplomacy, negotiations, appeals to the Galactic Council. That's what civilized species did when facing superior force. That's what the Council expected. Kate thought about her sister Linda, about her nephews, ages 8 and 10, about the last video call where they had shown her the garden they were planting, about the future they would never have. "I want authorization for immediate retaliation," Kate said. President Carter looked at her for a long moment. "If we attack, there's no going back. The Council will condemn us. Other species might join the Valorians against us. We could end up facing the entire galaxy. They already think we're violent animals," Kate said. "They already denied us. They stood by and watched while New Haven burned. If we back down now, they'll think they can attack any human world whenever they want. We need to show them that attacking humans has consequences." "I agree," said Admiral Cooper. "We've spent 20 years playing nice, trying to fit into their civilized galaxy. Where did it get us? Our people are dead. We need to respond." President Carter looked around the table. Every officer nodded. Every face showed the same cold determination. "Make it fast," the president said. "Make it decisive. Show them what happens when you attack Earth." Kate allowed herself a thin smile. "With pleasure." 48 hours later, a human fleet assembled at the edge of Valorian space. 23 ships, destroyers, frigates, and cruisers. They were older designs built during Earth's unification wars. Railguns instead of plasma weapons, missile systems instead of energy beams, kinetic barriers instead of fancy shields. The Valorians detected them immediately. Admiral Kethrak, fresh from his victory at New Haven, took command of the defense. He assembled his fleet, 107 ships, and moved to intercept. He transmitted a message to the human fleet demanding their immediate withdrawal. Captain Ryan Blake commanded the destroyer Vengeance. He was young for a captain, only 32, but he had come up through the ranks during the border conflicts. He knew how to fight. "Admiral Kethrak sends his regards," his communications officer said. "He says we should run home before we embarrass ourselves." Ryan smiled. "Tell him we're here to collect a debt. For New Haven." "He's not going to negotiate," the officer said. "I know," Ryan said. "That's what I'm counting on." The Valorian fleet moved into formation. They arranged themselves in a standard defensive pattern, overlapping their shield coverage to create a nearly impenetrable wall. It was textbook military doctrine, the same formation they had used successfully for centuries. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from her flagship, the carrier Independence. She studied the Valorian formation and nodded. "Just like the simulations, they're predictable. Should we attack?" her tactical officer asked. "Not yet," Kate said. "Let them get comfortable. Let them think they know what we're going to do." The two fleets drifted closer, 10,000 kilometers apart, 5,000. The Valorians opened fire first, plasma bolts streaking across the void. The human ships scattered, breaking their loose formation into dozens of smaller groups. "Now they're confused," Kate said. "They expected us to form up and charge. Instead, we're moving like we're running away." But the human ships weren't running. They were repositioning. Captain Ryan Blake led his squadron in a wide arc around the Valorian left flank. 6 destroyers moving fast, engines burning hot. The Valorians adjusted to track them, pulling ships from the center to reinforce the flank. That's when Commander Lisa Chen struck. Her ship, the cruiser Defiant, had been hanging back, looking damaged and vulnerable. The Valorians had dismissed it as a cripple. They were wrong. Lisa had powered down non-essential systems to hide her true capabilities. Now she lit up her engines and drove straight at the weakened Valorian center. "All power to forward railguns," Lisa ordered. "Fire on my mark." The Valorians scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons. Railguns were different. Solid metal slugs accelerated to a fraction of light speed. Pure kinetic energy, fire, Lisa said. The railgun spoke. Magnetically accelerated projectiles tore through Valorian shields like paper. 3 ships exploded immediately. 5 more lost power as the slugs punched through their hulls. Missiles away, Lisa's weapons officer reported. Behind the railgun strike came a wave of missiles. Hundreds of them. The Valorians tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. Explosions blossomed across their formation. On the Valorian flagship, Admiral Kethrak watched in shock as his perfect formation fell apart. How are they doing this? Their weapons are primitive. His tactical officer had no answer. The truth was simple but terrifying. The Valorians had evolved beyond war. They still had weapons, still had fleets, but they had forgotten how to actually fight. Their tactics came from textbooks. Their formations were ceremonial. Humans were different. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years. Every trick, every strategy, every hard lesson learned in blood was passed down and studied. Human officers didn't just learn tactics, they lived them. Captain Ryan Blake brought his squadron around for another pass. This time they attacked from behind, hitting the Valorian ships while they were focused on Lisa's frontal assault. Target their engines, Ryan ordered. Don't try for kills. Cripple them. Make them sitting ducks. His gunners were precise. Railgun rounds smashed into engine blocks. Missiles targeted power conduits. Within minutes, a dozen Valorian ships were drifting helplessly. Admiral Kate Sullivan coordinated the entire battle from her flagship. She moved squadrons like chess pieces, always hitting where the enemy was weakest, always pulling back before they could respond effectively. Lieutenant Commander Jerry Stone led a fighter squadron into the heart of the Valorian formation. His ships were small and fast, too quick for the big plasma cannons to track. They darted between enemy vessels, dropping mines and firing missiles at point-blank range. "This is insane," his wingman said over the radio. "We're outnumbered 5-1. Numbers don't matter if they can't hit us," Jerry replied. "Stay fast, stay unpredictable." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Valorians kept trying to regroup, to form up and use their superior numbers, but the humans never let them. Every time the Valorians concentrated their forces, the humans would strike from a different angle. Every time they split up to chase the human ships, they would be hit by a coordinated assault. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible chaos, and humans were experts at fighting in chaos. Captain Beth Morgan commanded the frigate Resolute. Her ship was old and battered, but she knew every trick it could pull. When 3 Valorian cruisers cornered her, she vented her reactor coolant, creating a massive cloud of superheated gas. The Valorians flew right into it, their sensors blinded, their hulls scorched. Beth's ship emerged on the other side and put railgun rounds into each of them. By the 4th hour, Admiral Kethrak realized he was losing. His fleet was being picked apart piece by piece. He tried to order a withdrawal, but the humans had anticipated that too. They had positioned ships to block the escape routes. "We need reinforcements," Kethrak told his communications officer. "Contact the nearest base. Tell them we're under attack by a major human force." "What should I tell them about enemy numbers?" the officer asked. Kethrak looked at his tactical display. 23 human ships, his fleet, or what was left of it, still numbered over 60. But they were losing. "Tell them," Kethrak said slowly. "Tell them we don't know how many. Tell them the humans fight like nothing we've ever seen." In the 6th hour, the Valorian fleet finally broke. Ships began jumping to hyperspace without orders, fleeing in panic. Others surrendered, broadcasting distress signals and powering down their weapons. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Independence and watched the enemy scatter. Around her, the crew cheered. They had won. "Casualty report," Kate ordered. 4 ships lost, her tactical officer said. The destroyer Courage, frigate Liberty, corvette Swift, and cruiser Dauntless. Total crew casualties around 800. "We have another 6 ships with significant damage." Kate nodded. 800 dead. It hurt. Every loss hurt. But they had destroyed or crippled 73 Valorian ships. They had shattered a fleet 5 times their size. "Open a channel to the Valorian homeworld," Kate said. A moment later, the Valorian High Council appeared on the screen. They looked terrified. "This is a..." The Valorian Empire did not accept defeat gracefully. Instead of withdrawing as demanded, they called upon their allies. Within a week, the Krethian Syndicate and the Xiphon Collective had pledged their support. Together, they represented over 2,000 warships. battle stations, and enough firepower to level planets. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. They declared humanity a threat to galactic peace. They authorized the use of force to contain the human menace. They voted to support the Valorian Empire's defensive actions. On Earth, President Andrew Carter watched the council vote on his office screen. He sat alone in the dim light thinking about what came next. His advisors had urged caution. They had suggested negotiations. They had warned that humanity couldn't win against the combined might of three major civilizations. He thought about New Haven, about the footage of children running from falling bombs, about Governor Linda Shaw's last message, begging for someone to save her people, about Admiral Kate Sullivan's face when she learned her sister was dead. President Carter stood and walked to the communications center. He called for a global broadcast. Within minutes, every screen on Earth, Mars, and the colony worlds showed his face. "My fellow humans," he began. 3 weeks ago, the Valorian Empire attacked New Haven without warning. They killed 8,000 of our people, men, women, and children who had done nothing wrong except want to build a new home among the stars. He paused, letting the anger in his voice come through. We responded. We struck back. We showed the Valorians that attacking humans has consequences. And now they're scared. So scared that they've called on their allies. So scared that they've convinced the Galactic Council to declare us a threat. They want to wipe us out before we can fight back again. Another pause. President Carter looked directly into the camera. They think we'll surrender. They think we'll beg for mercy. They think we're afraid of their numbers, their technology, their 1,000-year-old empires. They're wrong. We're not afraid. We're angry. And we're going to show them exactly what angry humans can do. He took a breath. Effective immediately, Earth is on full war footing. Every resource, every factory, every shipyard is now dedicated to our survival. We're going to build ships. We're going to build weapons. We're going to build an arsenal that will make the galaxy think twice before they ever threaten humanity again. The broadcast ended. Across human space, people reacted. Some were scared. Some were excited. But most just nodded and got to work. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since they first learned they weren't alone in the universe. They had hoped for peace but planned for war. The mobilization was total and immediate. Civilian shipyards that built transport vessels retooled to produce destroyers. Mining operations on the asteroids doubled their output. Scientists who had spent their careers studying peaceful applications of fusion power now designed warheads. Dr. Helen Carter, who had been part of the failed council delegation, found herself leading the weapons research division. She worked 18-hour days developing new missile systems, better railguns, more powerful reactors. She barely slept. None of them did. "We need to match their plasma weapons," her assistant said one night. "Our kinetic weapons are effective, but we need more range." Helen shook her head. "We don't need to match them. We need to be different. They expect us to fight like them. We need to fight like us." She pulled up old military records from Earth's history. The Battle of Midway, Stalingrad, the guerrilla wars of the 20th century. Every conflict where a smaller force had defeated a larger one through strategy, deception, and sheer determination. "Look at this," she said, pointing to records from World War II. When America fought Japan, they didn't try to match their carrier tactics. They developed their own approach. Wolf packs of submarines, island hopping campaigns. They adapted to their enemy's weaknesses. Her assistant studied the data. "So we find the aliens' weaknesses and exploit them." "Exactly," Helen said. "The Valorians are predictable. They follow doctrine. The Krethians are aggressive but reckless. The Xiphons are cautious to a fault. We use that against them." While scientists worked on weapons, the military trained for the coming war. Commander Greg Hamilton took charge of Mars defense. The Red Planet was humanity's second most important world, home to 3 billion people and the largest shipyards outside Earth. Greg knew Mars would be a target. He spent every waking hour preparing for its defense. He couldn't build more ships fast enough, so he built other things. Orbital defense platforms, missile batteries hidden in the asteroid belt, automated gun systems scattered across the moons of Jupiter. If they want Mars, Greg told his staff, they're going to bleed for it. Lieutenant Sophie Turner trained fighter pilots for the coming battles. She was one of the survivors from New Haven, had been off-world on a supply run when the attack happened. Everyone she knew was dead. Her parents, her friends, her fiancé. She threw herself into training with fierce intensity. She pushed her pilots hard, demanding perfection. Some complained. She didn't care. In 3 months, maybe less, we're going to face enemy fighters that are faster than ours, tougher than ours, and flown by pilots with centuries of experience. She told her squadron, the only way we survive is by being better. Not better trained. Not better equipped. Better at killing them before they kill us. One young pilot raised his hand. How do we do that? Sophie smiled grimly. We cheat, we lie. We hit them when they're not looking. We use every dirty trick in the book. They think we're barbaric? Fine. Let's show them what barbarians can do. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Colonel Jack Morrison prepared his Marines for ground combat. He was Jake Morrison's younger brother, and he had watched the Council rejection with barely contained rage. Now he had a chance to do something about it. Listen up, he told his troops. The galaxy thinks we're violent animals. They think we haven't evolved past killing each other. You know what? They're right. We're really, really good at violence. We've spent 10,000 years perfecting it. And now we're going to teach them why that's a bad thing to laugh about. He pulled up tactical displays showing alien ground troops. The Valorians are big and strong, but they're slow. They rely on heavy armor and energy shields. So we hit fast and hard, get inside their shield radius, and make this personal. What about the Crethians? A Marine asked. Intelligence says they're naturally aggressive, evolved predators. They are, Jack agreed. But they're also pack hunters. They rely on overwhelming numbers. So we split them up, isolate them, and pick them off one by one. Use the terrain. Use traps. Make them scared to go around corners. The months passed in a blur of preparation. Human space became an armed camp. Every world, every station, every ship was ready for war. Children as young as 10 learned emergency procedures. Civilians trained in basic combat. Nobody expected to be safe when the attack came. The attack came sooner than expected. The Crethian Syndicate moved first. They were the most aggressive of humanity's enemies, insectoid creatures that lived for combat. Their fleet of 300 ships dropped out of hyperspace near Mars, expecting to find a lightly defended world. They found hell instead. Commander Greg Hamilton had spent months preparing. The moment the Crethian fleet appeared, he sprung his trap. The asteroid belt erupted with weapons fire. Hundreds of hidden platforms opened up, launching missiles by the thousands. The Crethians had no idea the missiles were there. They slammed into the alien formation, overwhelming their defenses through sheer numbers. 50 ships died in the first minute. All ships engage at will, Greg ordered. The human defense fleet, smaller than the enemy but positioned perfectly, struck from multiple angles. They had studied Crethian tactics and knew what to expect. The aliens liked to charge in aggressive swarms, relying on numbers and ferocity. So the humans didn't let them swarm. They spread out, forcing the Crethians to split their forces. Then they hit the isolated groups with concentrated fire. Captain Neil Foster commanded a destroyer in Greg's fleet. He led his ship straight at a group of Crethian cruisers looking reckless and overconfident. The aliens took the bait, surrounding him. Then Neil triggered the mines his ship had been laying as it advanced. Explosions tore through the Crethian formation. While they were reeling, the rest of the human fleet hit them from behind. Weapons free, Neil said calmly. Kill them all. The Battle of Mars lasted 8 hours. When it was over, 200 Crethian ships were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet lost 23 ships, but Mars was safe. Commander Greg Hamilton broadcast the battle footage to Earth. First blood to humanity, he said. Let's see them laugh now. But the Crethians weren't the only ones attacking. The Xiphon Collective, more cautious than their allies, sent a smaller force to probe human defenses around Titan, one of Saturn's moons. They expected light resistance and planned to establish a forward base. Lieutenant Sophie Turner met them with her fighter squadron. The Xiphons had superior technology, faster ships, better shields. But Sophie didn't fight fair. Her fighters carried experimental weapons, missiles with adaptive AI that could predict enemy movements. She had her pilots attack in coordinated waves, forcing the Xiphons to choose which threats to defend against. Remember, Sophie told her pilots, they're cautious. They'll retreat if we... Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the holographic display that showed Alpha Centauri system. Intelligence had been tracking Valorian fleet movements for weeks. Everything pointed to one thing. The enemy was gathering their largest force yet, preparing for a massive assault on Earth itself. 800 ships. Battlecruisers, destroyers, carriers. The Supreme Admiral Kethrak himself commanded the fleet, the same leader who had ordered the destruction of New Haven. He had been humiliated in the earlier battles and now sought revenge. "How many ships do we have?" Kate asked her tactical officer. 62 combat-ready vessels," came the reply. "Another 20 in reserve, but they're not fully equipped. 62 against 800. The numbers were worse than the first battle. But Kate had something the Valorians didn't. She had spent 6 months preparing this system, not with ships but with strategy. "Show me the asteroid field," she ordered. The hologram zoomed in on the massive belt of rock and ice that surrounded Alpha Centauri. Thousands of asteroids, some as large as cities, drifted in chaotic orbits. Navigation through it was dangerous. Most ships avoided it completely. Kate had spent months turning it into the largest weapon in human history. "Status on the mines?" she asked. "All deployed," her weapons officer reported. 30,000 automated mines scattered throughout the belt, each one with enough explosive power to crack a cruiser in half. They're disguised as debris. The enemy won't detect them until it's too late. Defense platforms? 500 platforms hidden in the larger asteroids. Railguns, missile launchers, and EMP generators, all remote-controlled from here. Kate nodded. "What about the freighters?" 20 civilian vessels, all loaded with antimatter charges. Remote piloting systems installed. They'll look like refugee ships until we activate them. It was a trap on a scale never before attempted. Every piece had to work perfectly. One mistake and the entire plan would collapse. But Kate had learned something about warfare that the Valorians never understood. Victory didn't come from having better weapons. It came from making your enemy fight on your terms. "When will the Valorian fleet arrive?" Kate asked. 6 hours, her navigation officer said. "Their scouts are already in system. They know we're here." "Perfect," Kate said. "Let them come. Let them think they have us cornered." Far across the system, Supreme Admiral Kethrak sat in his command chamber reviewing the battle plan. His tactical display showed the pathetic human fleet gathered near the asteroid belt. 60 ships against his 800. It would be a massacre. "They're desperate," his second-in-command said. "They've chosen to make their stand here because they have nowhere else to run." Kethrak nodded. "We'll crush them quickly and move on to Earth. This war has gone on too long. Humanity needs to be taught a final lesson." His fleet began the approach. 800 ships in tight formation, shields overlapping, weapons charged. They moved with confidence born from centuries of military tradition. The Valorians had won 1,000 battles using these same tactics. They saw no reason why this battle would be different. They were about to learn why humans studied history so carefully. Captain Beth Morgan commanded the destroyer Resolute. Positioned at the edge of the asteroid belt, her ship looked damaged, trailing coolant vapor and listing to one side. It was all fake, a deception to draw the enemy in. "Enemy fleet entering the belt," her sensor officer reported. "They're maintaining formation," Beth smiled. "Of course they are. They always maintain formation. That's their first mistake." She opened a channel to Admiral Kate Sullivan. "Trap is set. Waiting for your signal. Hold position," Kate replied. "Let them get deep. Let them commit." The Valorian fleet pushed into the asteroid belt. Their shields deflected the smaller rocks easily. Their sensors swept the area looking for threats. They saw nothing unusual. Just a scattered human fleet and a lot of empty space. They were looking at the belt like it was an obstacle. They should have been looking at it like it was a weapon. "All ships to attack formation," Supreme Admiral Kethrak ordered. "Prepare to engage the human fleet." His ships began to spread out slightly, adjusting to surround the human position. That's when Kate gave the signal. "Now," she said quietly. Commander Nick Stevens sat in the Defense Control Center, his hands moving across the holographic interface. With a single gesture, he activated 30,000 mines scattered throughout the belt. The mines had been waiting in silence, drifting among the asteroids, completely invisible to enemy sensors. Now they came to life. Their engines fired, sending them toward the nearest Valorian ships. The enemy had seconds to react. They didn't have seconds. The first wave of mines struck the Valorian formation like a hammer. Explosions rippled through their ranks. Ships that had been side by side suddenly found themselves torn apart. The overlapping shields that were supposed to protect them instead channeled the blasts, amplifying the damage. 50 ships died in the first 30 seconds. "All defense platforms. Open fire," Kate ordered. Hidden among the asteroids, 500 automated weapons platforms came online, Railguns began firing solid slugs at relativistic speeds. Missiles launched in waves. EMP generators pulsed, disrupting Valorian shields and sensors. The Valorians tried to respond, but they were trapped. Asteroids blocked their lines of fire. The mines kept coming. And the human fleet, which had appeared weak and scattered, suddenly attacked with coordinated precision. Captain Beth Morgan brought her destroyer in fast, her fake damage forgotten. Target their command ships. Take out their coordination. Her railgun spoke, sending tungsten rods through Valorian armor like it was paper. 3 command cruisers exploded. The enemy fleet began to lose cohesion as junior officers struggled to take command. Lieutenant Amy Price remotely piloted the civilian freighters from the defense center. The ships looked harmless, like refugees fleeing the battle. The Valorians ignored them. That was their second mistake. Amy guided the freighters directly into the heart of the enemy formation. 20 ships, each loaded with enough antimatter to vaporize a city block. She waited until they were surrounded by Valorian vessels. Detonating in 3, 2, 1, Amy said calmly. The freighters exploded. 20 simultaneous antimatter detonations in the middle of a crowded fleet. The blast waves overlapped, creating a chain reaction of destruction. 100 Valorian ships simply ceased to exist. Another 100 were crippled, their hulls cracked, their systems failing. On his flagship, Supreme Admiral Kethrak watched his fleet die around him. This wasn't a battle. This was an execution. The humans had turned the asteroid belt into a killing ground, and his ships were the prey. All ships, retreat, he ordered. Break formation and withdraw. But the humans had planned for that too. They had positioned their ships to block the escape routes. Every direction the Valorians turned, they found human destroyers waiting with loaded weapons. Major Chris Bennett led a fighter squadron through the chaos. His orders were simple. Hunt down any ship that tried to flee. Make sure none of them made it home to warn the others. This is for New Haven, he said over the radio, then launched a full spread of missiles at a fleeing Valorian cruiser. The battle raged for 12 hours. It should have been over in 2, but the humans were methodical. They didn't just want to win. They wanted to send a message. Captain Dan Phillips commanded the cruiser Retribution. His ship had been damaged in an earlier battle. Half his crew dead. His sister killed at New Haven. He had no mercy left. When a Valorian destroyer tried to surrender, broadcasting distress signals and powering down weapons Dan's crew wanted to accept. They were soldiers, not murderers. But Dan remembered the footage from New Haven. The Valorians hadn't accepted surrender there. Keep firing, he ordered. They don't get to surrender. Not today. His weapons officer hesitated. Sir, that's not following rules of war. They wrote the rules when they attacked New Haven, Dan said coldly. Fire. The Valorian destroyer died. Dan felt nothing but cold satisfaction. By the end of the battle, Supreme Admiral Kethrak's flagship was the only major vessel still intact. He sat in his command chamber surrounded by emergency lighting and the screams of his dying crew. His fleet was gone. 800 ships reduced to floating wreckage. Open a channel to the human commander, he said quietly. Admiral Kate Sullivan appeared on his screen. She looked tired but satisfied. I surrender, Kethrak said. Please, no more. We surrender. Kate studied him for a long moment. You're the one who ordered the attack on New Haven. Yes, Kethrak admitted. I was following orders from the High Council. Just following orders, Kate repeated. That's what they all say. The same excuse used by war criminals throughout history. She leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to broadcast this battle to every system in the galaxy. You're going to tell them exactly what happened here. How humans turned your mighty fleet into scrap metal. How 800 ships were destroyed by 60. How your tactics, your technology, your 1,000 years of military tradition meant nothing against a species that actually knows how to fight. Why? Kethrak asked.
Why humiliate us?
Because fear is the only language your kind understands, Kate said. You thought we were weak. You thought you could attack our colonies and we'd just accept it. Now you know better. Now everyone will know better. She cut the transmission. Around her, the bridge crew watched in silence. The Galactic Council's delegation arrived at Earth 3 weeks after the Battle of Alpha Centauri. 5 ships unarmed and broadcasting peaceful intent on every frequency. They requested permission to land and begin negotiations. President Andrew Carter made them wait for 2 days before responding. It was a calculated move. Let them sit in orbit looking down at the planet they had dismissed as primitive. Let them think about the fleet humans had built, the weapons they had deployed, the battles they had won. Finally, the president granted permission for landing. But not in Geneva, where Earth's government traditionally met with aliens. Not in New York or Washington or any of the major cities. Instead, he directed them to land at New Haven, or rather what was left of New Haven. Ambassador Thelzara stepped off her ship and looked at the devastation. The colony had been beautiful once. Green fields, modern buildings, parks where children played. Now it was craters and ash, blackened metal twisted into grotesque shapes. Graves. Thousands of graves stretching as far as she could see. "This is what your people did," a voice said behind her. Thelzara turned to see Commander Jake Morrison. He looked older than she remembered from that first council meeting. Lines around his eyes, gray in his hair, the weight of war on his shoulders. "I know," Thelzara said quietly. "I've seen the footage. I've watched it hundreds of times. Every night I see those children running from the bombs." "Good," Jake said without sympathy. "You should see it. You should never forget it." He gestured toward a shuttle. "President Carter's waiting. Let's not waste time." The delegation was taken to a temporary building erected near the New Haven Memorial. Inside, President Carter sat at a table with his advisors. Admiral Kate Sullivan, Dr. Helen Carter, Colonel Jack Morrison, Commander Greg Hamilton, the faces of humanity's resistance. Elder Vexthor materialized in the room, his crystalline form pulsing with nervous energy. "President Carter, thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "I didn't agree," Carter said flatly. "You begged and I allowed it." "There's a difference." The bluntness shocked the alien delegates. They were used to diplomatic language, careful phrasing, political games. Carter had no patience for any of it. "You came here to negotiate peace," Carter continued. "So let's be clear about something. You don't have leverage. You don't have options. You started this war by attacking civilians. You escalated it by bringing in your allies. You tried to exterminate us. And you failed. Now you're here hoping we'll show you mercy. We made mistakes," Vexthor admitted. "We underestimated your capabilities. We failed to understand what humans were capable of when threatened." "No," Admiral Kate Sullivan said sharply. "You understood perfectly. You just didn't care. The Council warned the Valorians about attacking us. Everyone knew humans had a violent history. You all chose to ignore it because you thought your advanced technology made you superior." Thelzara spoke up. "You're right. We were arrogant. We looked at your history of warfare and thought it made you barbaric. We didn't realize it made you experts. Experts at killing," another alien delegate said. "That's what you are, killers." Jake Morrison stood up slowly. "Yes, we're killers. We're very good at it. We've spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other in increasingly creative ways. And when you attacked New Haven, you gave us a new target for all that expertise." He walked over to the alien who had spoken. "You want to call us barbaric? Fine, we're barbaric. But we're barbaric enough to have shattered 3 major civilizations in 6 months. We're barbaric enough to have destroyed over 2,000 ships. We're barbaric enough to have made the entire galaxy afraid of us." He leaned closer. "So maybe being barbaric isn't such a bad thing after all." The room fell silent. President Carter let the moment stretch, let the tension build. Then he spoke. "Here are our terms. Non-negotiable. The Valorian Empire will cede all territory within 20 light-years of human space. They will pay reparations of 1 trillion credits to rebuild New Haven and compensate the families of the dead. They will completely demilitarize for the next 50 years. "That's impossible," Thelzara protested. "My people need military forces for defense." "Your people should have thought of that before attacking ours," Kate Sullivan said coldly. "You wanted to see what happens when you threaten humanity. Now you know. We don't negotiate with people who kill our children." "What about the Krethians?" Vexthor asked. "The Xiphons." "The Xiphons have already agreed to our terms," President Carter said. "They're smart enough to know when they're beaten. The Krethians are facing internal rebellions. Their client species are breaking away. They don't have the strength to refuse anything we demand." He pulled up a holographic display showing star maps. "As for the Galactic Council itself, here's what's going to change. Humanity gets a permanent seat on the Security Council, full voting rights, equal status to any other member." "That's unprecedented," one of the alien delegates objected. "Species must earn council membership through centuries of peaceful development." Dr. Helen Carter laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Centuries of peaceful development? Is that what you call it? You maintained peace because nobody dared challenge the existing order. You maintained peace because you forgot what war actually means. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the graves of New Haven. We reminded you. We showed you that peace maintained through ignorance is just delayed violence. You should be grateful we're only asking for a council seat. We could demand a lot more. Like what? Vexthor asked nervously. Like complete surrender, Admiral Kate Sullivan said. Like occupation of your homeworlds. Like trials for war crimes. Supreme Admiral Kethrak ordered the attack on New Haven. By any definition, that was genocide. We could demand he face human justice. Thelzara closed her eyes. He's dead. He died at Alpha Centauri. Convenient, Kate said. But there are others in your leadership who approved that attack. We have names. We have records. We could prosecute every one of them. But you won't, Vexthor said, because that would make you like us, vindictive, cruel. President Carter shook his head. No, we won't prosecute them because it's not worth the time. We have better things to do than chase down every bureaucrat who signed off on a military order. But make no mistake, Elder, we remember. We have records of every species that voted to declare us a threat. Every civilization that supported the Valorian Empire. Every delegate who laughed when we were denied council membership. He stood and walked to the center of the room. You want to know the real reason we're not demanding more? It's not mercy. It's practicality. We could occupy your worlds, we could destroy your civilizations, but then we'd have to rebuild them. We'd have to govern them. We'd have to take responsibility for billions of aliens who hate us. That sounds exhausting, Jake Morrison added. We'd rather just make sure you never attack us again. And how do you plan to ensure that? Another delegate asked. Admiral Kate Sullivan smiled. Fear, simple, honest fear. Every species in this galaxy now knows what happens when you threaten humanity. You tried to exterminate us and we nearly destroyed you in return. That lesson won't be forgotten for a very long time. Thelzara looked at the human leaders with a mixture of fear and respect. You've thought this through very carefully. Of course we have, President Carter said. Did you think we'd fight a war without planning for peace? We're not animals. We're strategists. Every battle, every victory, every calculated move has been leading to this moment. He sat back down. Now, do you accept our terms or do we continue this war? Because I promise you, if we continue, the next target won't be your military. It'll be your infrastructure, your shipyards, your industrial centers. We'll cripple your economy so badly it'll take centuries to recover. The alien delegates looked at each other. They had no choice and everyone in the room knew it. The Valorian Empire was broken. The Krethians were collapsing. The Xiphons had already withdrawn. No other civilization wanted to risk facing humanity's military machine. We accept, Vexthor said finally. All terms. The Valorian Empire will demilitarize and pay reparations. Humanity will receive a permanent council seat. We will broadcast these terms to the entire galaxy. Good, President Carter said. Now comes the hard part. Hard part? Thelzara asked. We've agreed to everything you demanded. Jake Morrison stepped forward. The hard part is rebuilding. The Valorian Empire is going to reconstruct New Haven, not with machines, not with contractors, with your own people, your engineers, your workers, your citizens. That will take years, Thelzara protested. Probably, Jake agreed, but you're going to do it anyway. Every building, every park, every home. You're going to rebuild this colony exactly as it was. And while you do it, you're going to work alongside human survivors. You're going to hear their stories. You're going to understand what you destroyed. Thelzara looked out at the devastation of New Haven. Why? Why make us do this? Because words are cheap, Admiral Kate Sullivan said. Anyone can apologize. Anyone can claim they've learned their lesson. But actions mean something. When your people spend years rebuilding what they destroyed, when they work beside humans and see us as people instead of threats, maybe then you'll actually understand what you did. Colonel Jack Morrison, who had defended Europa against impossible odds, spoke for the first. 6 months had passed since the peace treaty was signed. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The Valorian Empire, once proud and mighty, was a shadow of its former self. Their military had been dismantled, their territorial claims had been reduced, and thousands of their citizens now worked on New Haven, rebuilding the colony they had destroyed. Captain Ryan Blake stood at the edge of the construction site, watching Valorian workers install the frame for a new school building. They worked alongside human engineers, following the original blueprints recovered from the colony's archives. Every building had to be exactly as it was before the attack. "How are they doing?" Admiral Kate Sullivan asked, walking up beside him. Ryan considered the question. "Better than expected. At first they were resentful, angry about being forced into manual labor. But something changed about 3 months in. I think they started to understand what they were building, who it was for." He pointed to a Valorian woman working with a human carpenter. "That's Jara, Ambassador Thelzara's daughter. She volunteered to come here, works 12-hour days, never complains." Kate watched the young Valorian for a moment. "Has she talked about why she volunteered?" "She said her mother told her about the council meeting. About how Commander Jake Morrison asked if they'd considered that humans fight, because they have something worth fighting for. She wanted to understand what that meant." "And does she?" Ryan nodded. "Last week she asked me about the school she's helping rebuild. I told her it was where Governor Linda Shaw's niece studied. Linda was my aunt. I showed Jara pictures of the kids who went there, showed her their artwork, their projects, their dreams for the future." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "She cried, sat down in the dirt and cried for an hour. Said she never realized that destroying a building meant destroying futures, that killing people meant killing possibilities." Kate put a hand on his shoulder. "That's why we made them rebuild. Words don't teach lessons like this. Actions do." Across the galaxy, other changes were taking place. The Crethean Syndicate had fractured completely. Their client species had used the chaos of the war to break free, forming independent governments. The Cretheans themselves were now a minor power, their aggressive nature turned inward as various factions fought for dominance. The Xiphon Collective had taken a different path. They had withdrawn from galactic affairs entirely, focusing on internal development. But they had sent a formal apology to Earth and opened diplomatic relations. They were cautious, careful, and made it clear they had learned their lesson. But the biggest change came in the Galactic Council itself. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the council chamber for the second time in his life. The last time he had been here, he had stood as a supplicant begging for humanity's acceptance. Now he stood as Earth's first permanent representative to the Security Council. The chamber looked the same. The same thousands of species, the same floating platforms and containment fields, but the atmosphere was completely different. When Jake walked to the speaking platform, nobody laughed. Nobody dismissed him. They watched in respectful silence Elder Vexthor materialize to begin the session. "We gather today to formally welcome humanity to the Galactic Council. Commander Jake Morrison will serve as Earth's representative. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that humans are now full members of this body, with all rights and responsibilities that entails." There was no applause, no celebration, just acknowledgement of a fact everyone already knew. Humanity had earned its place not through diplomacy or cultural exchange, but through superior warfare. After the formal ceremony, Jake met with other council representatives in a smaller chamber. They were polite, professional, and clearly nervous. He could see the fear in their eyes, the calculation in their expressions. They were wondering what humanity would do with its new power. "I know what you're thinking," Jake said. "You're wondering if we're going to use our council seat to push aggressive policies, to demand more territory, to threaten anyone who disagrees with us." The other representatives said nothing, but their body language confirmed his guess. "Here's the truth," Jake continued. "We don't want to be the galaxy's police force. We don't want to conquer anyone. We just want to make sure nobody ever attacks human colonies again. And we want to help build a galaxy where species actually work together instead of just avoiding conflict." "How can we trust that?" a delegate from a small species asked. "Your military capabilities are unmatched. What stops you from using that power?" "The same thing that stopped you from using yours for thousands of years," Jake said. "Mutual interest. Peace is better for everyone. Trade, cooperation, cultural exchange, all of that works better when nobody's fighting." He leaned forward. "But here's the difference between the old council and the new one. The old council maintained peace through ignorance. You forgot what war looked like. You dismissed species like humans as primitive because we hadn't forgotten. The new council will maintain peace through knowledge. Everyone knows what war costs now. Everyone knows what happens when you start one." Admiral Kate Sullivan had retired from active military service. She was too valuable for fleet command now. Instead, she had become Earth's ambassador general, the primary liaison between human military forces and the Galactic Council. Her first major initiative was the Sentinel program. The galaxy needs a defensive force, she explained to the Council. Not tied to any one species or civilization. A volunteer force drawn from all member worlds trained to protect against external threats. And who would command this force? Vexthor asked. Humans, Kate said bluntly. We've proven we're the best at military strategy. We've proven we can win against superior numbers and technology. It makes sense for us to take the lead. Some might see that as humanity trying to dominate the galaxy militarily, another delegate said. Kate shook her head. Command isn't domination. We'll train officers from every willing species. We'll share our knowledge and tactics. But yes, the ultimate command structure will be human-led, because when the next crisis comes, you'll want people in charge who know how to fight. The proposal was controversial. Some species supported it enthusiastically. Others worried about giving humans too much military authority. But eventually, the practical arguments won out. The galaxy had spent thousands of years without a major war. Now they had seen what could happen when conflict erupted. Having a professional defensive force made sense. The first Sentinel fleet was assembled at New Haven, a symbolic choice that nobody missed. Captain Ryan Blake took command, his